Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here and passionate about exploring the hidden truths of history, especially through a biblical lens, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. In today's episode, we're going to tackle a fascinating subject, the origin of black people according to the Bible. This is an essential topic, and we'll explore biblical history, genealogy, and key characters whose stories are woven into the narrative of African descent. Who is a black person? A black person is typically defined by their shared African ancestry, dark skin pigmentation, and a rich cultural heritage that originates from the African continent. However, this definition transcends physical appearance and also encompasses a collective identity shaped by historical experiences, such as colonialism, slavery, and the struggle for civil rights. In broader terms, black is not just about skin color. It is an identity tied to the historical and social context where people are categorized based on their ancestry, skin tone, and shared cultural experiences. Black identity can be shaped by various factors, including culture, language, and geography. People of African descent from different parts of the world, such as North America, the Caribbean, Latin America, and Europe, also identify as black, even though their experiences and cultures may differ due to historical events like the African diaspora. What makes a person a black person? Being identified as a black person is primarily linked to ancestry. Black people are largely descendants of Africa, specifically sub-Saharan Africa. Melanin, the pigment responsible for darker skin, is a significant feature, but skin color alone does not fully define blackness. Some individuals with African ancestry may have lighter skin due to genetic diversity, yet they still identify as black based on their heritage. Black identity is also shaped by social, cultural, and historical elements. Historically, people from the African continent or those descended from enslaved Africans have been categorized as black. This categorization was often imposed through colonialism and slavery, which emphasized skin color as a social marker of race. Despite this, blackness has become a source of pride and cultural identity, with shared customs, languages, religions, and histories uniting black people globally. What continent is considered as black today? Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, is considered the primary black continent today. This region is the origin of most black people and is home to an immense diversity of ethnic groups, languages, and cultures. Africa contains over 1.3 billion people, a significant portion of whom are black. However, the concept of a black continent can be limiting because not all Africans are black, especially in regions like North Africa, where lighter-skinned Arabs and Berbers are also native populations. Outside of Africa, regions such as the Caribbean, parts of Latin America example, Brazil, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and North America example. The United States and Canada have significant black populations, largely due to the transatlantic slave trade and subsequent African diaspora. These areas have rich black cultures shaped by African heritage, colonial history, and the quest for equality and civil rights. Number of countries containing black people. Black people are found in nearly every country across the world. While Africa is home to 54 recognized countries, many of which have predominantly black populations, large black communities also exist globally. Some notable regions and countries with significant black populations include United States, approximately 47 million black people, mostly descendants of enslaved Africans. Brazil, home to the largest black population outside of Africa, with around 56 million people of African descent. Haiti, over 95% of the population is of African descent, making it the first black republic in the world after gaining independence from France. Jamaica and other Caribbean nations. These countries have predominantly black populations, largely descendants of enslaved Africans brought over during the transatlantic slave trade. Black communities also exist in the United Kingdom, France, Colombia, Venezuela, and Canada. Among others, in countries like Australia, New Zealand, and even parts of the Middle East and Asia, there are smaller black populations, often descendants of African migrants. Population trends. How the black population has been increasing or decreasing. The global black population has been increasing, particularly in Africa. The continent is currently experiencing the fastest population growth rate in the world, with projections estimating that by 2050, Africa's population could double, reaching about 2.5 billion people. This growth is largely attributed to higher fertility rates in African nations compared to other continents, alongside improvements in healthcare and living conditions. In contrast, black populations in some regions outside of Africa have been fluctuating. For instance, the black population in the United States has steadily grown, though at a slower rate compared to other minority groups, such as Hispanics. Meanwhile, in Brazil and the Caribbean, there are concerns about the socio-economic challenges that impact black communities, such as lower birth rates and migration trends, which could affect long-term population growth. In many diaspora communities, black populations are growing as migration patterns shift and more people of African descent move across borders for better economic opportunities. Europe, for instance, has seen an increase in its black population due to migration from Africa and the Caribbean. Biblical context and ethnicities. An introduction to the peoples of the Bible. We can't begin this journey without understanding the biblical worldview concerning race and ethnicity. In the Bible, ethnic and geographical identities are central to the story of humanity. The Bible is filled with references to nations and peoples, many of which are connected to Africa and the Middle East. Genesis 10, known as the Table of Nations, is the starting point for understanding the origins of the world's people groups according to the Bible. Here, we are introduced to Noah's three sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who are said to be the forefathers of all the nations after the flood. These three sons became the patriarchs of the different ethnic groups, and Ham's lineage, in particular, is associated with African nations. So, let's break this down step by step, starting with Ham. Ham and his descendants, the roots of Africa. Genesis 10 verse 6 to 7 tells us that Ham had for sons, Cush, Mizraim, Phut or Put, and Canaan. From these for sons, we trace the development of some of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in Africa and the Middle East. 1. Cush. Cush is identified with ancient Ethiopia or Nubia. Located south of Egypt, the Cushites are often depicted as dark-skinned people in biblical texts. Genesis 2 verse 13 even mentions Cush in connection to the Garden of Eden, suggesting that it was part of the earliest regions inhabited by humans. In the Bible, Cush represents the southernmost parts of the known world. Isaiah 18 verse 1 refers to Cush as a land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, a place of powerful and influential people. The Cushites were known for their military prowess and played key roles in biblical history. 2. Mizraim is the Hebrew name for Egypt, one of the most powerful and advanced civilizations in human history. Egypt is often portrayed in the Bible as a land of great wealth and power. From the story of Joseph Genesis 41 verse 41 to 43 to the Exodus 12 verse 31 to 41, Egypt plays a central role in many biblical narratives. Egypt, or Mizraim, was also a civilization deeply connected to Africa's heritage, and it was founded by the descendants of Ham. Genesis 12 verse 10 describes how Abraham journeyed to Egypt during a time of famine, showing Egypt's prominence even in the earliest biblical times. 3. Phut is associated with the region west of Egypt, likely corresponding to modern-day Libya. While not as frequently mentioned as Cush or Egypt, Phut still plays a role in the prophetic texts of the Bible. For example, Ezekiel 30 verse 5 mentions Put as one of the nations that would face judgment from God during Egypt's downfall. 4. Canaan. The Canaanites, though not African, were also descendants of Ham. The land of Canaan is significant in the Bible because it was the promised land given to the Israelites. Genesis 9 verse 18 to 27 recounts the story of Noah cursing Canaan after Ham's transgression. However, it's important to note that this curse was specific to Canaan, not all of Ham's descendants, as some have falsely interpreted in history. These four sons of Ham form the foundation of Africa's presence in the Bible. They represent a broad and rich legacy that includes the flourishing civilizations of Egypt, Ethiopia, and other African regions. The Cushites in detail, a mighty people. As mentioned earlier, Cush is frequently associated with Ethiopia, and its people are referred to as Cushites throughout the Bible. Let's take a closer look at how the Cushites are portrayed. 1. Genesis 2 verse 13, Cush is linked to the region around the Garden of Eden, showing that this land had a foundational role in the early history of humanity. This suggests that Cush, or Ethiopia, was part of the ancient world's sacred geography too. Isaiah 18 verse 1 to 2. This chapter speaks of the Cushites as a people feared far and wide, known for their power and influence. The Bible's depiction of the Cushites shows them as a formidable and respected people. 3. 2 Chronicles 14 verse 9 to 15. In this passage, King Asa of Judah faces an enormous Cushite army led by Zerah. Despite being outnumbered, Asa prays to the Lord, and God delivers him victory over the Cushites. This battle highlights the military strength of the Cushites and their reputation as a significant force in the ancient world. For Numbers 12 verse 1, Moses married a Cushite woman, and this led to controversy with his siblings, Aaron and Miriam. God himself defended Moses' marriage to this woman, showing that people of African descent were not only present, but integrated into Israelite society. The Cushites, therefore, represent a people of prominence, influence, and connection to biblical history. They are depicted as strong, capable, and integral to the broader narrative of the ancient Near East. Nimrod, the first great king. Nimrod, the great-grandson of Noah and the son of Cush, is another significant figure in the Bible. Genesis 10 verse 8 to 12 describes Nimrod as a mighty hunter before the Lord and a king who established some of the world's earliest cities, including Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Nineveh. 1. Genesis 10 verse 10. This verse tells us that Nimrod's kingdom began in Shinar, which is the region of Mesopotamia. Nimrod is credited with founding Babylon, one of the most famous cities in the Bible. 2. Genesis 11 verse 1 to 9. While Nimrod himself is not mentioned by name in this passage, many biblical scholars believe that he was the leader behind the construction of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel narrative represents humanity's attempt to build a great city and tower that reaches the heavens. However, God confounded their language, and the people were scattered across the earth. Nimrod's legacy as a king and empire builder is crucial for understanding the early civilizations that arose in Mesopotamia. His connection to Cush further solidifies the African presence in the ancient world's formative periods. The Ethiopian eunuch and early Christianity. The story of the Ethiopian eunuch in the New Testament is another critical example of Africa's presence in biblical history. In Acts 8 verse 26 to 40, Philip encounters an Ethiopian eunuch on the road to Gaza. The eunuch, who was returning from worshiping in Jerusalem, was reading the book of Isaiah, but did not fully understand it. Philip explained the scriptures to him, and the eunuch asked to be baptized. 1. Acts 8 verse 27 to 39. This passage describes the Ethiopian eunuch's conversion to Christianity. After Philip explains the prophecy of Isaiah, the eunuch declares his belief in Jesus Christ and is baptized on the spot. This story is significant because it shows that Africans were among the first converts to Christianity, and it highlights the spread of the gospel beyond the borders of Israel. 2. Isaiah 53 verse 7 to 8. The eunuch was reading this passage from Isaiah, which describes the suffering servant, a prophecy about Jesus Christ. Philip used this text to explain the gospel to the Ethiopian eunuch, demonstrating how Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament prophecies. The Ethiopian's conversion is a pivotal moment, showing the early spread of Christianity into Africa. The fact that this Ethiopian official was already worshiping in Jerusalem suggests a deep historical connection between Africans and the biblical faith, long before the arrival of European missionaries. This event signifies the presence of African believers from the very beginnings of Christianity, reinforcing the idea that Africa had a key role in the early Christian church. The Queen of Sheba, an African monarch in biblical history. Another notable figure in the Bible is the Queen of Sheba, a monarch whose visit to King Solomon is recorded in 1 Kings 10 verse 1 to 13 and 2 Chronicles 9 verse 1 to 12. The Queen of Sheba is believed to have come from the region that is today Ethiopia or Yemen, further emphasizing the connection between Africa and the Bible. 1 Kings 10 verse 1 to 13. The Bible describes the Queen of Sheba as a ruler of great wealth and wisdom, who traveled to Jerusalem to test Solomon with hard questions. She brought with her lavish gifts of gold, spices, and precious stones, which demonstrates the wealth and prominence of African kingdoms during this period. 2. Matthew 12 verse 42. In the New Testament, Jesus himself mentions the Queen of Sheba referred to as the Queen of the South, saying that she came from the ends of the earth to hear Solomon's wisdom. This shows that her story was well known, even in Jesus' time, and underscores her importance in biblical history. The Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon highlights the deep cultural and diplomatic ties between Africa and the biblical world. She represents the wisdom and sophistication of African rulers and the long-standing connections between Africa and the lands of the Bible. African presence in the early Christian Church. As we move into the New Testament era, the African presence continues to play a significant role in the development of the early Christian Church. Aside from the Ethiopian eunuch, there were other key figures of African descent who contributed to the spread of Christianity. 1. Simon of Cyrene. In Luke 23 verse 26, Simon of Cyrene, who came from a region in modern-day Libya, was compelled to carry the cross of Jesus on his way to Golgotha. Cyrene was a city with a significant Jewish population, and Simon's presence in Jerusalem during the Passover suggests that he was a faithful Jewish pilgrim. His act of carrying the cross has been remembered throughout Christian history, and it highlights the involvement of Africans in the central events of the Christian faith. 2. Acts 13 verse 1. In this passage, we learn of a man named Simeon, called Niger, who was one of the prophets and teachers in the church at Antioch. The name Niger means black, suggesting that he was of African descent. Simeon played a key role in the early church's leadership, and his presence in Antioch highlights the diversity of the early Christian movement. These examples show that Africans were not only present, but active in the leadership and growth of the early Christian church, further underscoring Africa's rich biblical heritage. Biblical interpretations and the African diaspora. Many scholars and theologians have also pointed to the Bible's influence on the African diaspora, especially during the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans in the Americas often identified with the stories of the Israelites who were liberated from bondage in Egypt. The Bible became a source of hope, inspiration, and resistance for many enslaved people of African descent. 1. Exodus 3 verse 7 to 10. The story of Moses and the liberation of the Israelites from Egypt became a powerful symbol for enslaved Africans. Just as God had heard the cries of his people in bondage, so too did many believe that God would deliver them from slavery in the New World. This connection to the Exodus story fueled the spiritual resilience of African communities throughout the diaspora. 2. Psalm 68 verse 31. This verse, which reads, "Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God," has been interpreted by many as a prophecy of Africa's role in the future of Christianity. For African believers, this verse offered hope that Africa would play a vital part in God's plan for the world. Conclusion: Africa's deep biblical roots. As we've explored today, the Bible is filled with references to Africa and its people. From the descendants of Ham to the powerful kingdoms of Cush and Egypt, Africans played an integral role in biblical history. The stories of the Ethiopian eunuch, the Queen of Sheba, and Simon of Cyrene demonstrate the active involvement of Africans in the spread of Christianity and their deep connections to the faith's earliest foundations. Ultimately, the Bible shows us that Africa has always been a part of God's plan for humanity. The rich history and contributions of African people in the Bible are undeniable, and they continue to inspire believers around the world today. So, as we wrap up this discussion on the origin of black people according to the Bible, I hope this journey has given you a deeper understanding of Africa's biblical legacy. If you found this video enlightening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history and culture through a biblical lens. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.